The Galactic Core Council Chamber was a place of ancient power. It floated in the void above a white dwarf star, a colossal ring of silver and glass, its walls alive with streams of light that formed alien language glyphs. The chamber was built by the first spacefaring races millions of years ago, and for all its history, it had rarely been filled with such fear. Representatives from 72 civilizations sat in their seats, each arranged in a vast circle. Some were small and delicate, floating in protective orbs of liquid. Others were tall, armored beings that barely fit into their designated spaces. Their voices, layered with translators, merged into a constant storm of argument. In the center of the room, a three-dimensional hologram spun slowly. It showed a galaxy map. Dozens of bright dots marked colonies and worlds. A black shadow was spreading through them, system by system. It moved like ink spilling in water, consuming everything it touched. The Ether Swarm. The swarm was unlike any known enemy. It was not a fleet. It was not a civilization. It was a living tide, millions of coordinated creatures in space, guided by something unknown. Where it moved, planets vanished, not conquered, not enslaved, just gone. A voice, low and harsh, cut through the noise. "We cannot fight it." The speaker was Admiral Kaysher of the Vorthan Republic, a reptilian being covered in deep green scales, his golden eyes calm but cold. "The swarm has consumed 3 of our frontier systems in less than a cycle. Our weapons slow them but do not stop them. We must think strategically." Across the chamber, another representative hissed. "Strategic retreat means abandoning." "Billions!" Kaysher's gaze did not waver. "If we spread our fleets too thin, we lose everything. Sacrifice is necessary." From a smaller seat near the far edge, Dr. Lyra Quinn of Earth's delegation leaned forward. She was one of only 2 humans present. Her voice was calm but firm. "What you're calling sacrifice is the destruction of innocent worlds," she said. "And it won't work. The swarm will just keep coming. You think you're buying time, but you're not. You're letting it get closer." Many turned to look at her. The humans had only recently been granted a temporary place in the council, and most members considered them too young a species for such a crisis. Lyra could feel the weight of their skepticism. Kaysher's voice was edged with quiet disdain. "Dr. Quinn, your people live on a death world. You are adapted to survive against nature itself. But this is not a hurricane or a predator in a forest. This is a galactic threat." Lyra met his gaze. "And because we live on a death world, we understand one thing better than most of you. Predators don't stop until something stops them. You can't run forever." There was a brief silence in the chamber. Then the insectoid diplomat Zorvek clicked his mandibles softly. "If humans have an alternative, we will hear it." Lyra exchanged a glance with the man seated beside her. Captain Arjun Rios, commander of Earth's fleet in this sector. Rios was calm, broad-shouldered, and carried the kind of confidence that came from having faced disaster before. Rios stood and spoke in a voice that carried across the chamber. "We propose a counter-offensive," he said. "We take the fight to the swarm." A ripple of disbelief passed through the gathered aliens. Some laughed, a deep vibration in the translators. Others muttered in their own languages. Kaysher's tail lashed once against the floor. "You propose what exactly? You cannot mean—" "Exactly that," Rios interrupted. "We have a plan, a dangerous one. But it can destroy the swarm, not just delay it." A thin, crystalline being from the Iron Collective spoke sharply. "This is madness. No one attacks the swarm head-on." Rios only shrugged. "Then no one survives." Before the council could argue further, the chamber's lights shifted. An urgent alarm, a deep, harmonic tone, filled the air. The holographic map in the center zoomed in on a new area, the Harkon system, a core world cluster. The black shadow of the ether swarm was there, moving fast. In 4 standard days, it would reach Harkon Prime, home to over 12 billion citizens from 5 civilizations. The room exploded into noise again. Emergency fleet movements were discussed, but Lyra could see the same fear in their eyes. They didn't believe they could stop it. She stood. "You have 4 days," she said clearly. 4 days before the swarm reaches Harkon Prime. If you start running now, you might save some people. But if you give us those 4 days, she glanced at Rios, we can stop it. Kaysher narrowed his eyes. And what would you require? Rios didn't hesitate. Authorization to use restricted weapons, and full control of any Allied ships willing to fight. That is not possible, the crystalline diplomat said. The laws won't matter when the swarm eats your world, Rios said flatly. There was a dangerous quiet in the chamber. No one moved. The council was not used to being challenged this way, especially not by humans. Finally, Zorvek's insectoid voice clicked again. Perhaps the Deathworlders should be allowed their chance. I will commit 3 of my fast assault craft to their plan. That broke the silence. A few others offered small support. A frigate here, a medical ship there. Most did not, but it was enough. Kaysher looked at Rios long and hard. You have 4 days, he said finally. If you fail, we will cut our losses, and Earth will be abandoned like any other lost world. Rios gave a small smile. Then we won't fail. Later, Earth's orbital command station. The council meeting had ended hours ago, but the decision still felt unreal. In Earth's command station, above the blue curve of the planet, Lyra stood beside a wide viewport, watching the sun's light glint off the station's panels. Rios joined her, holding a tablet. They gave us just enough ships to make this work, he said. Not much, but enough. They gave us just enough rope to hang ourselves, Lyra muttered. Rios grinned. That's one way to put it. She looked at him. Do you really think this can work? We've never tested the charges in an actual star's corona. No, Rios admitted. But it's the only idea we've got that might hurt them. Heat, radiation, electromagnetic chaos. If the swarm has limits, that's where we'll find them. Lyra took a breath. She knew what he meant. Project Breaker had been Earth's secret weapon for years, a method of luring enemies close to a star, then detonating charges that would turn solar activity into a massive flare. It was dangerous to use, illegal under council law, and absolutely deadly if mistimed. But against the swarm, it might be their only chance. An alert tone sounded through the station. Rios tapped his tablet, and a holographic projection appeared between them. It was the swarm. The latest sensor data had come in from the scout drones. The shadow was still moving, but something had changed. They're adjusting their course, Lyra said slowly. Rios's jaw tightened. Where to? The projection shifted, showing the new path, straight toward Earth. Lyra felt her chest tighten. They're not going for Harkon Prime anymore? No, Rios said quietly. They're coming for us. He looked out the viewport at the blue planet below. Well, I guess we just became the bait. The news spread fast through the command station. Crew members, both human and alien, prepared with an intensity that left no room for fear. Starship hulls were reinforced for extreme heat. Supply bays were stripped for every last resource. Fighter pilots memorized their escape routes through dangerous solar currents. Lyra worked in the lab, running simulations on swarm behavior, while Rios coordinated with the few alien captains willing to join the mission. Most of them still thought the humans were insane, but more than one admitted quietly that they admired the courage. Solara, the alien officer assigned to monitor Earth's actions, arrived in the war room late that night. Tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and luminous silver eyes, she had been openly skeptical of humans since the day she arrived. Now she studied the swirling hologram of the sun and the swarm's projected path. "You cannot be serious," she said. "Diving into your star's corona is certain destruction." "It's certain destruction for the swarm, too," Rios replied. Solara tilted her head. "You speak as if destruction is acceptable." "It is," Lyra said from across the room, "if the alternative is extinction." Solara watched them for a moment longer, then said quietly, "I will remain on the flagship. I will see how Deathworlders fight." Rios smiled faintly. "Careful, you might enjoy it." The countdown had begun. 4 days. But now, those days would not be spent defending a distant world. They would be spent preparing Earth itself as the trap, the lure that might end the ether swarm. And somewhere out in the darkness between the stars, the living tide was coming. Not to consume just any world, but to challenge the one place in the galaxy where every living thing had grown up fighting to survive. A place the galaxy called dangerous. A place the galaxy feared, a death world. And for the first time, the galaxy would see why. The war room aboard Earth's orbital command station glowed with deep blue lights. Massive holographic projectors displayed the sun, Earth, and the incoming black tide of the ether swarm. Ships were moving into defensive positions, like pieces, on a giant chessboard. But this was a game where losing meant extinction. Captain Arjun Rios stood at the center table, hands behind his back. He was calm, almost too calm, his voice steady as he issued orders to human and alien officers alike. "Shift the Vanguard to orbit above the equator," he said. "Keep the smaller corvettes near the moon's shadow until I give the signal. If the swarm wants Earth, we'll make them fight for every inch of space." Dr. Lyra Quinn entered, carrying a tablet covered in simulation results. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was sharp. "I've run the models 100 times," she said. "If we trigger the stellar charges too early, the flare won't be strong enough to burn the swarm. Too late and, well, you know." Rios didn't look up. "We only get one shot." From the far side of the table, Solara, the tall, pale blue alien observer, folded her arms. "This entire operation breaks half the Council's military laws. The use of stellar manipulation is forbidden for good reason." Rios met her gaze without flinching. "Council laws won't save you when the swarm comes knocking. Heat and chaos are the only things we haven't tried. If it works, maybe we live. If it doesn't..." He shrugged. "At least we tried something." Solara tilted her head, studying him. Humans speak of survival with such comfort, as, though facing death is a familiar guest. Lyra gave a small, humorless smile. "On Earth, it is." The plan unfolds. The project was called Operation Furnace. The idea was brutally simple: lure the ether swarm dangerously close to the sun, then trigger a chain of controlled stellar flares using experimental charges. The swarm's organic bodies would be shredded by heat and radiation, and its strange energy link might be disrupted, but pulling it off would be anything but simple. First, the human fleet had to keep the swarm's attention. That meant fighting them head-on, long enough to make them chase. Then, the ships would race toward the sun, diving into the corona, the superheated outer layer where temperatures soared beyond reason. The charges would detonate at the right moment, using the sun itself as a weapon, and there was one more step. Hidden deep inside the swarm's movement pattern, sensors had picked up a central signal, a possible command unit. If they could capture it or destroy it, the swarm might fall into chaos. This was where human thinking differed from most alien strategies. Other civilizations avoided risk. Humans embraced it, sometimes with a smile. Day 1. Building the trap work. Began immediately. Inside the shipyards above Earth, engineers welded new armor plating onto frigates and cruisers, using rare alloys that could withstand intense heat. Drone swarms tested maneuvering routes near the sun's corona, charting dangerous currents of plasma. The small alien contingent, assigned to the operation, watched with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Solara walked the docking platforms, taking notes for her official report to the Council. She saw humans working without rest, hands burned from hot metal, eyes red from exhaustion. And yet, they joked with each other. They sang old songs. They moved with the strange energy of people who knew they might not come back, but refused to act afraid. At one point, Solara paused to watch two engineers argue over a shield emitter. "If we tune it to deflect more radiation, the cooling system will overload," one said. "Then it overloads," the other replied. "Better hot than dead," Solara made a note. "Humans choose damage over delay. Always forward. Never static. Day." 2. Testing the swarm before committing the whole fleet, Rios ordered a test. Several unmanned decoy ships loaded with volatile plasma were sent toward the swarm's outer edge. They were small, fast, and disposable. From the command station, Lyra and Solara watched the feed. The swarm noticed the decoys almost instantly. Thousands of black, insect-like shapes broke off from the main mass, moving with terrifying speed. The decoys fired their plasma payloads, bright bursts of energy lighting the void. The swarm tore through them anyway, but the plasma caused a reaction. The creatures slowed, their movements less coordinated. Rios pointed at the data. "They're vulnerable to sudden environmental changes, radiation, heat, maybe gravity, shifts. This is why the corona will work." Solara tapped her notes. "It will work, if you can get them there." Day 3. The command unit. While the engineers worked, Lyra focused on the strange signal coming from within the swarm. The data was encrypted in ways no known species used. It wasn't random, it had structure, rhythm, like a heartbeat. She suspected it was a control signal, a way the swarm stayed united across vast distances. That night, she met Rios in the observation deck. "If we can capture that signal source," she said, "we might be able to turn them against themselves, even confuse them long enough to break apart." Rios thought for a moment. "So we're not just bait. We're also thieves." She smiled faintly. Wouldn't be the first time humans played two games at once. Day 4. The enemy moves. The ether swarm was close now. Its shadow was visible on long-range telescopes, a black cloud moving like liquid across the stars. In the war room, the holographic map updated. The swarm had divided into 3 sections, 2 sweeping wide to flank, 1 massive cluster heading straight toward Earth. "They're adapting," Solara observed. "This concerns me." "It should," Rios replied. "Means they're smarter than we thought." The Council sent one final message. If Operation Furnace fails, Allied fleets will withdraw to protect their own worlds. In other words, Earth would be abandoned. Rios didn't bother sending a reply. The briefing that evening, the crews of every ship, human and alien, gathered in the flagship's main hangar. The air smelled of fuel and metal. Dozens of banners hung from the ceiling, some human, some alien, all faded from past campaigns. Rios stood before them. "In 4 days," he began, "the swarm will reach Earth. If it does, every city, every person, every story we've ever written, gone. The Council says we can't fight them, that we should run. They've never been to Earth. They've never stood on a death world. They don't understand that running doesn't save you. It just means you die tired." He paused, scanning the faces before him. "Our plan is dangerous. It will break laws. It will burn ships. It will test us in ways no simulation ever could. But it will work, because we will make it work. We will take them into the sun itself, and we will show them that there is no predator more dangerous than a human who refuses to lose. The hangar was silent for a long moment, and then the crews began to clap, slowly at first, then louder, until the sound echoed through the metal walls. Night before departure, Lyra sat in the lab, finalizing the detonation sequence for the stellar charges. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her mind was clear. She thought of the billions of lives not just on Earth, but in every world the swarm would touch if they failed. Solara entered quietly. She held 2 cups of a warm, spiced drink from her homeworld. "For focus," Solara said, "your people work differently from mine, but perhaps you need the same things in the end." Lyra accepted the cup. "Thanks. I didn't think you approved of any of this." "I don't," Solara said honestly, "but I am beginning to understand it. Where most see danger, you see opportunity, even if that opportunity might kill you." Lyra gave a small smile. "Welcome to Earth." Departure. The next morning, the fleet moved. Dozens of ships rose from Earth's shadow, engines flaring bright against the black of space. The sun loomed ahead, a burning giant that filled the view screens with gold and white fire. The swarm's shadow was behind them, a wave of living darkness chasing across the void. From the flagship's bridge, Rios watched the distance shrink. "Keep them close," he ordered. "If they slow, we slow. If they run, we chase. They need to believe we're just desperate prey." Lyra worked at her station, monitoring the swarm's signal. The heartbeat was growing stronger. They were close to the command unit. Solara stood beside her, eyes flicking between the readings and the swarm's image. "Once we hit the corona," Rios said over the comms, "there's no turning back. Everyone ready?" A chorus of affirmatives came from the fleet. The black tide of the swarm filled half the sky now. Its front edges were so close the individual creatures were visible, dark, insect-like things with glowing veins, moving with terrifying speed. The sun's light bathed the fleet in white fire. The corona shimmered ahead, a wall of heat and chaos. Lyra looked up from her console. "This is it," Rios nodded. "Time to see if Deathworlders can make the sun angry." The fleet plunged forward. The sun filled every screen aboard the human fleet. It was a vast wall of gold and white fire, so bright that filters dimmed the view to a gentle glow. Streams of plasma arched into space like rivers of molten light, each one large enough to swallow whole planets. Behind them, the ether swarm was closing in. The swarm moved like a storm made of living shadows. From a distance, it looked like smoke. Up close, each particle was a creature, black, spined, and gleaming with strange inner light. Their wings or limbs, whatever they were, shifted constantly, allowing them to twist and change direction, faster than any ship could. On the flagship Resolute, Captain Arjun Rios stood with his crew, eyes fixed on the tactical map. "They're matching our speed," he said calmly. "Good. Let them think we're running scared." Dr. Lyra Quinn didn't. Look up from her station. "The central signal is still with them. Stronger now. That means their command unit is in the main cluster." Solara, the alien envoy, studied the readouts. "Do you humans not fear this?" she asked. "The swarm has destroyed worlds, older and stronger than yours." Rios gave a faint smile. "Of course we fear it. But fear's just fuel, Solara. The trick is using it before it uses you." The first clash. The swarm didn't wait for the trap to fully close. From its massive body, smaller groups broke away, darting toward the human fleet like black spears. Each group was made of hundreds of creatures flying in tight formation, weaving between each other so perfectly it seemed like one living weapon. "Enemy intercept in 30 seconds, the tactical officer warned. "Open fire," Rios ordered. Instantly, the space between the fleets lit up with energy fire. "Plasma bolts. Railgun rounds and bright streams of laser light tore into the oncoming attackers. Some creatures exploded into shards, but many simply kept coming, their bodies shrugging off damage that would have shattered a ship. One swarm group slammed into the flank of the destroyer Atlas. Dozens of black forms attached themselves to the hull, cutting into the metal like it was paper. On the bridge, Rios didn't shout, "Atlas, spin and burn them!" A moment later, the destroyer's thrusters fired at full strength, spinning the entire ship like a wheel. The sudden movement flung many of the attackers into space. Then the ship's rear engines ignited at close range, burning the rest away. In a flash of white-blue fire, Solara watched, wide-eyed. "That is not a tactic the Council would allow." "Good thing," Rios said. "We didn't ask for permission." Into the heat as the battle raged, the fleet continued toward the sun's corona. The temperature outside their shields rose every second, sensors warning of radiation spikes. Even with reinforced armor, no ship could survive long this close without burning out. Lyra worked quickly, her fingers flying across the console. "Charges are armed. We're 3 minutes from optimal detonation range." Solara frowned at the display. 3 minutes is long enough for the swarm to overtake us." "That's the idea," Rios replied. Sure enough, the swarm's main body was gaining. Thousands upon thousands of black shapes filled the rear cameras, their inner lights glowing brighter in the sun's glare. They weren't slowing. If anything, they were speeding up, drawn by the movement of the fleet, the heart of the swarm. Then Lyra saw it, a cluster of larger creatures at the swarm's center, moving in perfect formation. At the very heart of that cluster was a single, massive shape, different from the rest. It was smoother, with a faint golden glow instead of cold white. The heartbeat signal on Lyra's console spiked every time it moved. "There," she said. "That's the command unit." Rios leaned forward. "Mark it. On the tactical map, a red circle appeared around the target. If we take that out," Lyra explained to Solara, "the swarm might lose coordination. It won't destroy them all, but it'll give us a chance." Solara tilted her head. "How do you plan to reach it? The swarm will protect it." Rios smiled faintly. "Same. Way humans hunt anything dangerous. We make it chase something else." The bait Rios sent a signal to the frigate Horizon, one of the fastest ships in the fleet. "Horizon," he said over comms, "you're going to annoy the swarm." The frigate's captain didn't hesitate. "With pleasure." Moments later, Horizon broke formation and darted straight toward the swarm's center, weapons firing in all directions. The swarm reacted instantly. Hundreds of creatures veered off to pursue it, leaving gaps in the main body. "Horizon is drawing them away," Lyra confirmed. "The command unit is exposed." Rios gave the order. "Strike team, go!" "Theo, strike." From the underside of the flagship, 3 small, sleek gunships detached. They carried no heavy armor, only speed and stealth systems. Their job was simple and deadly. Slip into the swarm, target the command unit, and disable it. The gunships dove straight into the chaos. From the bridge, Solara watched in disbelief as the small ships weaved between black-spined creatures, their thrusters flaring bright in the shadows. The swarm lashed out at them, claws and beams flashing through space, but the gunships were too fast. One of them took a glancing hit and spun wildly, but recovered in time to rejoin the others. They reached the red-circled target, firing EMP. "Torpedoes!" the lead pilot reported. 2 bright pulses shot toward the golden-glowing command unit. A heartbeat later, the torpedoes detonated, flooding the area with blinding energy. The swarm staggers on Lyra's console. The swarm's signal went wild. The rhythmic pulses became erratic, broken, as if the swarm itself was confused. "They're disorganized!" she shouted. "We've got an opening!" Rios didn't waste a second. "All ships, full speed to the Corona. Prepare to drop charges on my mark." The fleet surged forward, leaving the struggling swarm behind. Without its command unit, the creatures were slower to react, their formations breaking apart into chaotic clusters. But the command unit was not destroyed, only stunned. Already the signal was beginning to stabilize. "They'll recover fast," Lyra warned. "We've got maybe 2 minutes." The sun's edge, the fleet reached the corona, the sun's blazing outer layer. Waves of plasma and magnetic storms danced like living fire. Sensors screamed warnings, shields strained, and the air inside the ships grew hotter despite cooling systems. "Positions," Rios called. "Drop the charges!" From each ship, small pods shot into space, drifting into carefully calculated locations around the corona. Inside each pod was a device humans had never used in battle before: experimental stellar detonators. Lyra began the countdown. Charges armed. Detonation in 60 seconds. Behind them, the swarm was closing again. Even disorganized, its sheer numbers were overwhelming. The black tide rolled toward the fleet, glowing faintly in the sun's light. Holding. The last minute felt longer than any in Rios's life. "Keep firing," he ordered. "We hold until the sun takes over." The fleet formed a defensive wall. Plasma cannons blazed, railguns thundered, and missiles streaked into the swarm. Ships shook under impacts, shields flaring bright. Solara gripped the railing, her usual calm gone. "How can you stand this?" Rios didn't look away from the screen. "Because someone has to." The flare. 5 seconds, Lyra said. The swarm was almost upon them. Black shapes slammed into the outer ships, tearing at armor, cutting deep scars into metal. Alarms filled the bridge. 3, 2, 1. "Mark!" Lyra hit the trigger. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the sun roared. A wall of light and fire exploded outward, brighter than anything the fleet had ever seen. It moved faster than thought, a wave of pure energy tearing through the corona and into space. The swarm was caught mid-charge, their black forms outlined in white before they disintegrated into ash. Shields flared and strained, but the fleet's reinforced armor held. The light passed, leaving behind silence, aftermath. The swarm's front. Lines were gone, burned away. The rest was scattered, their formations broken. The command unit's signal was gone entirely, either destroyed or lost in the flare. Solara stared at the display. You used a star as a weapon." Rios leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "Told you we'd make it work." Lyra was already scanning. "We've bought ourselves time, but it's not over. The swarm still has survivors, and they'll be back." The sun was now far behind the human fleet, a distant blazing dot in the black ocean of space. The aftermath of the great flare still lingered in the minds of every crew member. They had survived something few civilizations had ever dared to attempt. On the bridge of the flagship Resolute, Captain Arjun Rios stood quietly, his hands clasped behind his back. The crew was exhausted but working. Screens showed the wide arc of space they had just traveled through, free of the ether swarm. For now. Dr. Lyra Quinn leaned over her station, scanning for any trace of the enemy. "Still no sign of pursuit," she said. "We might have bought ourselves more time than I thought." Solara, the alien envoy from the council, stepped closer. Her tall, silver-skinned form looked almost peaceful in the soft light of the bridge. "Your plan was unexpected. The council never imagined humans would use a star as a weapon." Rios gave a faint smile. "The council didn't grow up on a death world. A flicker in the dark. For several hours, there was only quiet. Crew members repaired systems, reinforced shields, and patched damaged hull plates. Ships that had taken heavy hits were moved to the center of the formation for protection. Then, just as the crew was beginning to breathe easier, a faint pulse appeared on the long-range sensors. Lyra frowned. "Picking up something. Very weak. Could be debris from the swarm." Solara tilted her head. "Or it could be the swarm itself." The pulse grew stronger. This time, it wasn't a mass of thousands. It was only a few dozen. Shapes, moving in a strange, spiraling pattern. They're small, Lyra said, but fast, and they're not coming directly at us. Rios studied the tactical map. They're testing us. Strange new behavior. The small group of swarm creatures stopped outside weapons range, holding position in the darkness. They didn't attack. Instead, they simply watched. Through high-resolution cameras, the creatures looked different from the ones the fleet had fought before. Their spines were longer, and their bodies shimmered faintly, almost like they were covered in a thin layer of crystal. They're changing, Lyra murmured. Solara's eyes narrowed. The swarm learns. They always have, but never this quickly. One of the creatures broke away from the group and darted forward. It didn't aim for the largest ship. It aimed for one of the smaller repair craft drifting near the edge of the formation. Before Rios could give the order, the destroyer Atlas fired, destroying the attacker instantly. But instead of retreating, the rest of the swarm shapes moved in, not to fight, but to retrieve the remains of the fallen one. They're collecting their own dead? Lyra said in disbelief. That's new. A dangerous experiment. Hours later, the small swarm group was gone, vanishing into deep space. But the unease they left behind was heavier than before. We can't assume the same tactics will work. Again, Rios said during the fleet meeting. They're not just recovering, they're adapting. Lyra had been running simulations. If they can adjust their bodies that quickly, they could start resisting our weapons in days, not weeks. Solara looked grim. The Council once believed the swarm's strength was in their numbers. Now I see it's in their ability to change. You humans have hurt them. They will return different. The signal trapped 2 days later. The trap was sprung. It began as a faint distress call, not from any human ship, but from a council vessel far ahead. The voice over the transmission was garbled but desperate. Swarm. Ship disabled. Need assistance. Solara's eyes widened. That ship was supposed to be hundreds of light years away. Lyra checked the signal. It's genuine, or at least it's a perfect copy of Council encryption. Could be a lure. Rios didn't hesitate. If there's even a chance they're alive, we have to check. But we'll do it on our terms. Into the silent zone. The fleet approached the coordinates with caution. No swarm activity appeared on sensors. The Council vessel floated dead in space, its hull marked with strange, jagged cuts. No life signs. No movement. This is too clean, Lyra whispered. The swarm never leaves a ship untouched unless... Her words were cut off by the sudden appearance of hundreds of new contacts. They emerged from behind asteroids, from the shadow of the dead ship, even from deep inside its broken hull. Ambush. The tactical officer shouted. The new swarm. This was not the same enemy they had fought before. The creatures were faster, their movements sharper and more coordinated, even without a visible command unit. Their crystal-like armor refracted incoming laser fire, scattering the beams harmlessly. Plasma bolts still worked, but it took more hits to bring them down. They've hardened themselves against energy weapons, Lyra said, her voice tight. Switch to railguns and kinetic fire. The fleet adjusted quickly, firing high-speed projectiles that punched through the new armor. But the swarm had another surprise. When one creature was destroyed, fragments of its crystal coating would cling to nearby swarm members, making them even harder to damage. Solara's voice was low. They are turning your own attacks into their shield. Fighting back, the fleet adapted on the spot. Human gunners began targeting the unarmored joints between the crystal plates. Ships used rapid spin maneuvers to throw off swarm attackers, trying to latch onto their hulls. Rios ordered all smaller craft to fall back to the core of the formation. We can't let them pick us off one by one. Even so, the battle was costly. A patrol ship, Vigilant, took too many hits and had to be abandoned. Its crew escaped in escape pods, which were quickly retrieved by nearby destroyers. The swarm pressed harder, trying to force the fleet into breaking formation. A human counter-move Lyra spotted something on the sensors. The crystal armor was highly reflective, but it also refracted light in predictable ways. That meant, with enough calculations, they could turn the swarm's adaptation into a weakness. She explained quickly to Rios. If we concentrate high-intensity beams at a single point, the crystals will refract the light inward, overheating their own armor from within. Rios nodded. Do it. Within minutes, human ships began coordinating their fire in tight bursts. The beams converged on targeted swarm creatures, making their own armor boil and crack from the inside. The tactic worked. Several fell quickly, scattering the others. Solara allowed herself a small smile. You humans. You adapt too. A warning in the shadows. After a long and exhausting fight, the swarm finally withdrew. The surviving creatures scattered into deep space, leaving only wreckage and drifting crystal fragments, but victory felt hollow. Lyra examined the remaining debris. This wasn't their full force, it was another test. Rios stared out at the empty void. They're learning us, just like we're learning them. Every time we fight, both sides get better. Solara's voice was quiet. Then the question becomes, who learns faster? The coming storm back on the bridge, reports flowed in from scout ships. Swarm sightings were increasing in multiple systems. Some were small, some large, but all were moving in strange, coordinated patterns, as if preparing for something bigger. Rios called the fleet to readiness. We faced them twice and survived, but the next time, it'll be the real war. Solara turned to look at him. And if you lose? He met her gaze without blinking. Then the galaxy loses with us. The fleet accelerated into the dark, engines burning bright against the endless night, heading straight toward the unknown, where the swarm was waiting, stronger than before. The human fleet drifted in the shadow of a gas giant, its rings casting pale bands of light across the warships. Repairs were underway, but Captain Arjun Rios knew time was running out. The ether swarm was adapting at an alarming rate. Dr. Lyra. Quinn studied the latest swarm data. Her brow furrowed. Every time they retreat, they come back stronger. If we keep fighting alone, we'll be overrun. Solara, the alien envoy from the Galactic Council, looked troubled. The Council will not commit its full fleets. Too much fear, too much hesitation. Rios turned to her. Then we need help from those who aren't afraid. Solara's eyes widened. You mean? Yes, Rios said. We need to gather the Deathworlders. What are Deathworlders? In the language of the galaxy, a Deathworld was a planet. Where conditions were so harsh, most life could not survive. Gravity could crush metal. Weather could strip flesh. Predators could tear through steel. Species from such worlds were rare and feared. The galaxy viewed them as unpredictable, dangerous, even reckless. Humans were one, but there were others. Most of them lived in isolation, distrusted by the safer worlds. But Rios knew one thing. When it came to survival, Deathworlders did not run. They fought. The first stop, Vorkon. Prime. The first journey took the CO fleet to Vorkon Prime, a volcanic world under a sky of ash and lightning. The Vorkani were massive, scaled warriors with claws like curved blades. Their leader, High Warlord Drax, met Rios in a grand hall carved from black stone. You ask for alliance, Drax rumbled. But where was the council when the swarm burned our outposts? You humans are no different. Rios did not flinch. We're different because we know what it's like to lose, and we're not here to protect only ourselves. Lyra stepped forward. The swarm is learning. They'll come for Vorkon next. When they do, it won't matter if you hide behind mountains or lava seas. The hall was silent. Finally, Drax leaned forward, eyes glowing in the firelight. If we join you, we fight our way. No retreat. Rios smiled faintly. That's the only way I fight. The second stop, Krios 9. The icy moon of Krios 9 spun in eternal winter. Its inhabitants, the Kryval, were slender, crystalline beings who thrived in temperatures that froze most life solid. The Kryval were not known for war. They were engineers, builders of wonders. But Rios needed their technology. Queen Salira stood. Before a wall of shimmering ice, her voice like chimes. "You bring tales of fire and battle, Captain, but we have no armies." "You have minds," Rios replied. "And I've seen the swarm's new armor. We need weapons that can pierce it." The Queen considered this. "Our ice drills could pierce anything, even crystal," Solara added softly. "If you do not help, your peaceful halls will one day echo with the swarm's voice." Salira's eyes dimmed at the thought. "Then we will build. For you. For all." The reluctant third, Therak Belt. The asteroid belt of Therak was home to the Theraki, short, broad miners with skin like stone and tempers like meteor storms. They valued trade, not war. Rios found himself in a loud council chamber carved from asteroid rock surrounded by grumbling voices. "War costs credits," said one elder. "War loses ships," said another. "War is bad for mining," said a third. Finally, Rios slammed his hand on the table. "War is coming whether you want it or not. The swarm won't care about your trade routes. They'll strip your asteroids. Bare. And you with them." There was muttering. Then Elder Merrick leaned forward. "You speak like a Theraki. Fine, we'll give you our miners, but we'll fight from our ships. No fancy battle lines." "That's fine," Rios said. "I need fighters who know how to move in dangerous places." The unlikely fourth, Raxan Swamps. The swamps of Raxan were alive with thick mist and the hum of strange insects. The Raxani were amphibians with quick movements and sharper minds. They were experts in guerrilla warfare, striking unseen and vanishing into the shadows. Their leader, Chieftain Vera, met Rios in a hut woven from living vines. "You humans have spirit," she said with a sly grin, "but the swarm has no fear. How will you fight something that cannot be scared?" Rios met her gaze. "We won't scare them. We'll outthink them. And I hear the Raxani know how to fight where no one else dares." Vara's grin widened. "We do, and we enjoy it." Bringing them together. Within weeks, the human fleet was no longer alone. Warships from Vorkan, icecraft from Krios 9, asteroid miners from Therak, and swamp raiders from Raxan joined them. It was not an easy alliance. The Vorkani demanded direct assaults. The Kryval wanted to test experimental weapons first. The Theraki complained about long briefings. The Raxani simply vanished whenever they got bored. On the flagship Resolute, Rios held a meeting with all the leaders. "This will not work if we fight separately," he said firmly. "The swarm is counting on us to be divided. High Warlord," Drax crossed his arms. "And you think humans can unite Deathworlders?" "I don't think," Rios said. "I know, because we all came from worlds that tried to kill us every day. And we survived. Together, we can survive anything." For a long moment there was silence. Then Queen Salira of Krios 9 spoke. "The swarm has never faced all of us at once. Let them learn what that means. First blood of the Alliance. The chance came sooner than expected. Scout ships reported a swarm force approaching a small mining colony on the edge of Therak Belt. It was a perfect test. Rios split the Alliance into strike teams. Vorkani warriors would hit the swarm head-on, drawing them in. Theraki asteroid. Craft would launch hidden barrages from behind the rocks. The Raxani would infiltrate the swarm's flanks, while Kryval engineers set up long-range piercing beams. The battle began in a flash of fire and ice. Vorkani ships charged, their hulls glowing red from heat shields. Swarm ships swarmed forward, crystal armor glittering, and were smashed by heavy kinetic strikes from Therak miners hidden among asteroids. The swarm turned to flank, only to find Raxani craft darting out of the misty shadows, striking engines, before vanishing again. Overhead, Kryval beams sliced through the thickest swarm armor, shattering it like glass. The turning point? The battle was fierce, but for the first time, the swarm broke first. Survivors scattered into the void, leaving the colony intact. On the Resolute, cheers erupted. Rios looked at the Alliance leaders. That's what happens when Deathworlders fight together. Even Drax allowed himself a small smile. Perhaps humans do understand war. Solara, watching the display of unity, whispered, "The swarm will see this, and they will adapt again." Lyra nodded. "Then we'll be ready." The ominous message as the fleet celebrated, a strange transmission came through, not from the swarm, but from deep within unexplored space. It was a single phrase, repeated in hundreds of alien languages, even ones long dead. "They are coming." No one knew who sent it. No one knew how it reached them, but the meaning was clear. The real swarm force had not yet arrived. Rios straightened. "Then we keep building. We keep fighting. And when they come, they'll find the galaxy is not afraid." From the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Arjun Rios looked at the star field ahead. Somewhere in that darkness, the true ether swarm was coming. He could feel it. The earlier battles had been nothing but tests. Now the real war was about to begin. Solara, the alien envoy, entered the bridge with a grim expression. "Scouts report. The swarm's main fleet is moving. We estimate hundreds of thousands of ships." A silence fell across the crew. Lyra Quinn slowly exhaled. "So, this is it?" "Yes," Rios said, eyes steady. "This is where we hold the line." Preparing for the last battle, the Deathworlder Alliance had gathered every ship they could muster. The Vorkani war fleet gleamed like molten metal, heavy with armor and weapons. The Kryval's crystal ships glittered with precision-built weapons that could cut through anything. The Tharaki asteroid craft bristled with mining cannons, repurposed for war. The Raxani swamp raiders' small, agile ships were nearly invisible, in the void. All of them had come to one place, the Tarlan Rift. A region of space filled with unstable gravity wells and dangerous asteroid storms. It was here that Rios had chosen to fight. The terrain was deadly, but Deathworlders thrived in deadly places. Rios addressed the Alliance leaders in the war room. "We can't outnumber them," he said, "but we can outthink them. The Rift will be our weapon. We know how to fight where the galaxy says it's impossible." High Warlord Drax of the Vorkani growled in approval. "Let the Rift devour them." Queen Salira of Cryos 9 spoke calmly. "Our piercing beams will be positioned along the densest asteroid fields. Once their armor is cracked, the others can finish them." Chieftain Vera of the Raxani smirked. "And we will slip into their blind spots and cut them apart." Elder Mark of the Tharaki nodded. "We'll collapse the asteroids on them. Mining tools make good traps." The first signs hours later, the sensors lit up. The swarm was coming. A sea of living ships stretching across space. They moved as one, their crystal-like bodies shimmering in the darkness. The first wave struck like a storm. Vorkani warships met them head-on, shields glowing red from heat. The impact shook the rift itself, fragments of rock spinning away into space. "Hold formation," Rios ordered. "Let them push in." The Kryval's long-range beams fired, slicing through the swarm's outer layers. Shards of broken armor drifted in the void, but more swarm ships poured through. The rift fights back, A's. The swarm advanced deeper into the rift. The Tharaki sprung their trap. With coordinated blasts from their mining cannons, they shattered key asteroids. Massive rocks tumbled into the swarm's path, smashing into ships and scattering their formations. The swarm adapted, splitting into smaller attack groups. That was when the Raxani struck. Their Swamp Raider ships darted in and out of the chaos, disabling engines and leaving the enemy helpless as gravity wells pulled them into asteroid storms. Still, the swarm kept coming. The turning point hours into the battle the Deathworlder Alliance was holding, barely. But then the swarm brought out something new. Towering ships, larger than anything seen before, emerged from the shadows. Their armor was darker, absorbing the Kryval's piercing beams. "They've adapted," Lyra said, her voice tight. "We can't break their armor," Rios thought fast. "Then we hit them from the inside." He turned to Chieftain Vara. "Can your raiders board those ships?" Vara's grin widened. "We were hoping you'd ask." Into the beast, the Raxani launched boarding parties, slipping past the giant swarm ship's defenses. Inside, they planted charges at structural weak points. Explosions rippled through the massive vessels, cracking their dark armor. That was the opening the Vorkani needed. With a roar over comms, their warships slammed forward, ramming and blasting the weakened giants until they broke apart. The Alliance fleet pushed harder, but the swarm still outnumbered them. For every enemy ship destroyed, more took its place. Thati. Final Gambit Rios knew they couldn't fight forever. The Rift had one last weapon, its unstable core. If triggered, it would collapse, pulling everything in its radius into a massive gravity implosion. It would destroy the swarm fleet. But it would also destroy the Alliance fleet if they couldn't escape in time. He gathered the leaders. "This is our only chance. We lure them into the core, trigger the collapse, and jump out at the last second." Drax's eyes narrowed. "A warrior's ending." Salira's voice was calm. "Risky, but necessary." Mark grunted. "Let's make it happen." The trap is set. The Alliance feigned retreat, drawing the swarm deeper into the rift. The enemy followed, sensing victory. They did not notice the Tharaki ships planting charges along the rift's unstable fault lines. When the last swarm ship crossed the mark, Rios gave the signal. "Detonate." The rift began to tear itself apart. Gravity wells merged into a single. Monstrous pull, dragging ships toward the core. Asteroids shattered into dust under the force. "The last escape jump coordinates locked," Lyra shouted. "On my mark," Rios called out. The fleet struggled to break free of the rift's pull, engines burning at maximum. Swarm ships were torn apart, crushed into fragments by the growing singularity. 3, 2, 1, jump! In a burst of light, the Alliance fleet vanished, and behind them, the rift collapsed in on itself, taking the swarm fleet with it. The galaxy holds. When the fleet emerged into safe space, the stars were peaceful again. No swarm ships followed. The rift was gone. And so was the enemy. The Alliance ships, battered but alive, floated together. Across the comms, cheers and relief filled the air. Solara stepped to Rios's side. "You've done it. The galaxy is safe. For now." Rios looked out at the surviving Deathworlder ships. "We did it. All of us." The legacy of the Deathworlders' word of the victory spread across the galaxy. For the first time in history, Deathworlders were not feared. They were celebrated. Worlds that had once looked down on them now spoke with respect. Queen Salira's engineers shared their technology freely. Drax's warriors became the core of a new defense fleet. The Tharaki opened their asteroid fields to allies. The Raxani taught stealth and survival to those who had never known danger. And the humans, they were no longer newcomers to the stars. They were defenders of them. The quiet warning yet. In the quiet of his quarters, Rios replayed that strange old message. They are coming. He knew the swarm had been a threat, but maybe not the greatest one. Somewhere out there, something else was waiting. For now, the galaxy had peace, but the Deathworlders would be ready. Always.